Hello everyone, my name is Jana Stupowski and I'm your data visualization instructor. Today we're going to dive into Tableau basics. We're going to learn how to connect a data set to your workbook, and we're going to demonstrate some basic data cleanup and data preparation operations you can do before you start developing your visualizations. Let's go ahead and get started. When you first open a Tableau workbook, you are immediately drawn to this left side menu that invites you to connect to your dataset. We can connect to different types of files, and for the sake of simplicity, we will just use Excel or text files or CSV files in this course, but there are many others that you can connect to. You can also connect to different servers, but that's something typically done in larger corporations that run their own in-house databases. For the sake of simplicity in this course, we're going to connect to a simple text file. So you click text file and then you find that text file in your computer. And in this case, we're going to connect to Carpe Diem full data set. As you can see, Tableau has now brought in our spreadsheet, and this down here looks very similar to how our original spreadsheet looks like. Tableau typically pulls in a first 1,000 rows from your data set if it's longer than that. But however, you can change this number and bring in all the rows if you would like. But it's doing it so that it keeps the workbook running smoothly and efficiently. If you bring in too many rows, it may slow down the order of operations that you eventually build into your workbook. As you can see, each of our columns has a header, and they're automatically imported from our spreadsheet. There are two things to notice in each column. To the left side, there are small icons that indicate data type that Tableau automatically recognized, and they may or may not be correct. So it's always good to double check them. We can see that a column called timestamp has a calendar and a clock icon. If you click here, you can change the type of data, but this one has been identified correctly. This is a date field without the timestamp on it, so it's just identified as a date. And then these columns here are text fields, and so Tableau did the good job of identifying them as strings. Quantity is a number, and there's a choice of a whole or decimal number, and so are net sales and tax. Our ticket number is a unique identifier, and we will address that later to see whether that was correctly identified by Tableau or not. But I wanted to bring to your attention also that if we do bring in a data set that includes some sort of geographic data, then Tableau is able to recognize those. Anything from airport or airport code to city or county or zip codes. We can even bring in latitude and longitude data, and then Tableau is able to put specific pins on a map. But the initial cleanup should happen here at the very beginning, making sure that all your columns have the right data type identified. There is a tiny arrow in the upper right corner of the column headers, and the options that are available there invite you to either rename that column, or you can hide it if you feel like you're not going to use it during your project. And you do want to hide those columns because you only want to stick with the variables and with the columns in your workbook that you will truly use, because having too much present in your workbook may eventually affect the speed of all the operations that you will incorporate that later. And then there are some additional options for calculating field and grouping, but those are not to be addressed at this time. We will return to those later. Let's say I wanted to change the ticket column to a unique identifier. It's not a number, but it's supposed to be a unique identifier, so I'm going to make it a string because it's a text field. And I am actually going to rename it. I want to call it unique ID, ticket number. That's what my column is going to be called. I am not going to need item ID at this time, so I'm going to hide it so that I only keep here what I really need. I would like to extract the time only from this field because I already have a date field. And so what I would like to demonstrate to you is Tableau's ability to split your columns into multiple columns. We currently don't have the split option available because of the type of the data that this field includes, which would be date and time. So I'm going to change it to string. And in this case, now an option for splitting has opened up. I can either split automatically and let Tableau decide how that column will be split. And it looks like it used slash and then the colon to split my column because I'm left with 4 and 2, and then I'm left with 19 and then 52. It completely left out the date, but that's not what I want. So I'm gonna go back and I want to perform what's called a custom split. In this case, the user decides what is a separator. In this case, for me, I only want to extract time from this column, and so I'm going to use space because that's what separates date and time. I'm going to use space as a separator, and I want to split off the last one column. And so now I'm left with just time. I'm going to rename this column to time, and I'm going to hide this one because I don't need this one anymore. So now we have demonstrated how you connect data to your workbook. How can you change name of columns and how you can make sure that your data types are set up correctly. And we've also learned how we can split the content of columns or extract a portion of a column to create a new variable that we may want to use in the future. Please keep in mind that as you're manipulating this spreadsheet, this just builds metadata of your original spreadsheet. This does not change anything in your original spreadsheet from which you're importing the data. So again, that is kept in its original, and you're just applying all the changes here within the Tableau workbook. Once you develop visualizations in your workbook, it's time to save your file. There are multiple ways how you can save a Tableau workbook. You can save it as a TWB workbook, or you can save it as a Tableau packaged workbook. If you save it as a TWB workbook, that workbook sits physically on your hard drive and is connected to the data set that you've imported in. But if the location of the data set changes in the computer, then you're going to have to reconnect and help Tableau find the right location of that file. Oftentimes, if you have a need to share your workbook with someone and include the data set within the actual workbook, you package it. You package the data set into the workbook and you save it as a Tableau packaged workbook. You would typically do that when you submit your homework to me, or if you're looking to solve a problem on Tableau user community online, and besides just describing your problem to Tableau users, you can also attach a Tableau packaged workbook so they can open your workbook and help you implement the solution into your workbook directly. Lastly, in the upper right corner, let me quickly address connection type in Tableau. You can be connected to your data live. That means your workbook is connected to your data source live. And this is typically common in a large corporation when you're running powerful databases and hardware, because live connection can eventually, if your data set has too many rows, it can slow down your operation. On the other hand, you can choose to use an extracted connection. And what happens there is Tableau takes a snapshot of your data set in time. And this is the best way to handle your work when you're working with when the abilities of your hardware are limited and if you want to have a quicker connection. Downside is that you're creating a copy of your data set that could potentially be emailed outside of the company, but that just has to be kept in mind. When you're ready to refresh your connection because some new rows have been added to your data set, you can hit refresh, or you can go back live, refresh the connection, and then resave it again. Lastly, when we are setting up our data, we need to keep in mind that Tableau likes data tall and lean. So this is a typical format in which a lot of data sets come in, but Tableau prefers tall and lean. So instead of having a column for each date or quarters, we would want to have a date column, and then column for sales, and then column for customers. So now you should know how you can connect data set to your Tableau workbook, how you can make some basic adjustments to your columns, split them if you need to, make sure that your data types are set up correctly. And now we're ready to start working with actual visualizations. Thank you for listening.